Greetings, my dear listeners. Today we are going to dive into one of the most mysterious areas of human experience, the world of dreams, where reality and illusion intertwine so closely that it is sometimes impossible to distinguish where one ends and the other begins. Imagine for a moment you are lying in bed and the night is wrapping your house in a soft blanket of silence. Somewhere in the distance, you can barely hear the rustling of leaves, maybe the ticking of a clock in the next room. And in this silence, you and I will go on a wonderful journey into the world of those states of consciousness that make us think about the very nature of reality. Today, we're going to talk about what happens when the boundaries between sleep and wakefulness become blurred, like watercolor paint on wet paper. We will explore phenomena that cause us to question what we think is obvious, the difference between what is real and what we think is real. Let's start at the beginning. What is dreaming? Every night when we fall into the embrace of sleep, our brain does not stop working. On the contrary, it continues to create amazing worlds populated by images, sounds, emotions, and sensations. It's as if we have an invisible cinema in our heads, where every night a new film premieres, sometimes comedies, sometimes dramas, and sometimes real thrillers. Scientific research shows us that dreams occur predominantly during the rapid eye movement phase, the very phase when our brain activity is almost as high as it is during waking hours. Imagine this. The body is resting, the muscles are relaxed, and the brain is working with the same intensity as during the day. It is a paradoxical state where we are both asleep and awake at the same time at the level of neural activity. But dreams are not just random bursts of neural activity. They are a complex process in which our memories, emotions, fears, and desires are intertwined. Sleep is essential to our physical and psychological health, affecting brain function, emotional balance, immunity, and memory consolidation. We can say that every night we go through a process of internal recycling of everything that has happened to us during the day. And so, in this wonderful world of dreams, sometimes special events occur, events that make us wonder about the nature of consciousness itself. One such event is called a false awakening. Imagine this situation. You wake up in the morning, get out of bed, go to the bathroom, wash your face, have breakfast, and suddenly realize that all this time you have been sleeping. And suddenly you realize that you've been asleep all this time. You wake up, this time for real, and find yourself in the same bed from which you thought you had already got up. This is false awakening, the experience of waking up during sleep when you think you are awake, but in fact, you are still asleep. What is particularly striking about this phenomenon is its extraordinary realism. When a false awakening occurs, the environment around you seems absolutely real. You can see your room in minute detail, feel the texture of the sheets, hear familiar sounds. The mind creates such a convincing illusion of reality that it becomes almost impossible to distinguish it from a true awakening. Often during a false awakening, we start doing the very activities we normally do after we get up: cooking breakfast, taking a shower, talking to loved ones. Some people even try to write down in a diary the dream they have just had, not realizing that the act of writing it down is also part of the dream. But the most amazing thing is that you can experience several false awakenings in a row in one night. Imagine you wake up, get up, start doing your business, and then you wake up again and realize that everything before was a dream. But even this second awakening may turn out to be false, and the third, and the fourth. The French biologist Yves Delage described a case in which he experienced the same false awakening scene 4 times in a row. Each time he was absolutely sure that now he was awake for real. Can you imagine what it would be like to wake up again and again in the same reality, each time thinking that the previous one was a dream? It makes us wonder about the nature of reality itself. If our minds are capable of creating such convincing illusions, how can we be sure that what we believe to be reality is really real? This thought may seem unsettling, but it opens up amazing vistas for us to understand the workings of consciousness. Researchers identify 2 main types of false awakenings. The first type is a calm, unemotional experience. You wake up, start thinking about the dream you had, get up, and go about your normal activities. This state can be a transition to conscious dreaming, that amazing phenomenon where a person realizes that they are dreaming and can control the content of their dream. The second type of false awakening is quite different. It is colored by anxiety and fear. You feel like you are awake, but something is wrong. You hear strange sounds, see frightening objects, feel the presence of something supernatural. At the same time, you remain in bed, unable to get up and move. This state can be very intense and frightening. Interestingly, false awakening is different from sleep paralysis, a condition in which a person is aware that they are awake but cannot move because of temporary muscle immobility. In false awakening, there is no such paralysis. You can move, you can act, but all of this happens in the dream. Also, false awakening is different from conscious dreaming. In a conscious dream, you are aware that you are dreaming and can control what is happening. In a false awakening, every waking experience is perceived as a true reality. But there is an even more mysterious phenomenon: dreaming in dreams. This is the state of being asleep in a dream. Imagine this. You are in a dream, and in that dream, you fall asleep and see another dream. It is like Russian nesting dolls, nested one inside the other. Only instead of wooden dolls, there are layers of consciousness. One internet user described this experience. He was dozing off in a class at school, started having a conscious dream, tried to wake up, and seemed to be successful. The lesson continued, and then he woke up in his bed, not immediately realizing that the whole episode at school had been a dream within a dream. It makes us wonder how many levels of consciousness can exist simultaneously. Can there be a dream within a dream within a dream? Where is the boundary between these states? And what happens to our self-awareness when we move between these levels? Some researchers believe that daydreaming and false awakening are essentially the same phenomenon. The mind creates the illusion of waking up, which can occur in any environment, not necessarily in the room where you fell asleep. Others argue that these states are experienced differently and are different phenomena. What's particularly interesting is how these experiences are reflected in our culture. The film Inception made the concept of layered dreams popular. But the idea of dreams within dreams existed long before that. We find it in the literature of Shakespeare, Bulgakov, and Murakami. This shows that such experiences are not something exceptional. They are part of the universal human experience. But what does all this mean from a psychological perspective? Why does our mind create these complex, multi-layered constructs? One theory suggests that false awakenings and dreams in dreams may be a defense mechanism of the psyche. Perhaps this is how our subconscious mind tries to protect us from experiences that are too intense or disturbing by keeping us in a dream state. Imagine a situation. You are facing an important event that causes you anxiety. The day before, you may experience a false awakening in which the event has already occurred. This may be the psyche's way of rehearsing the situation, preparing for it in the safe environment of a dream. False awakenings often occur when we are stressed or overworked. When we are under pressure, our psyche may use these states as a way to cope. Recurring dreams, including false awakenings, are often associated with unresolved inner conflicts or deep emotional feelings. Perhaps these phenomena indicate that our psyche continues the process of integrating experience, even in sleep. It is trying to find ways to cope with what is going on in our lives using complex, multi-level constructs of consciousness. Another interpretation suggests that a dream within a dream may symbolize different levels of self-awareness. Perhaps each layer of the dream represents a different aspect of our personality or different levels of self-understanding. This could be a reflection of deep inner conflicts or difficulties in understanding our own nature. Interestingly, people who practice conscious dreaming have more false awakenings. This may be due to the fact that these people are more attentive to their dreams and remember them better. Or perhaps the practice of conscious dreaming itself somehow affects the structure of dreams. Conscious dreaming is an amazing phenomenon in which a person realizes that he or she is dreaming and can control the content of his or her dreams to a greater or lesser extent. More than half of people have experienced this state at least once in their lives. During conscious dreams, there is increased activity in the frontal lobe of the brain, the area responsible for logical thinking and willpower. People use conscious dreams for a variety of purposes: for personal growth, overcoming fears, solving problems, and developing skills. Some people even claim that they can receive inspiration or tacit knowledge in dreams that helps them solve complex problems. But there are also potential risks. Some experts believe that the practice of conscious dreaming can blur the lines between dreaming and reality, which can negatively affect mental health. High brain activity during such dreams can disrupt sleep quality and lead to frequent awakenings. Stephen LaBerge, one of the leading researchers on conscious dreaming, believes that in order not to lose awareness after a conscious dream, it is the false awakening that must be anticipated. This is an interesting paradox. In order to stay conscious, one must anticipate the loss of awareness. All these phenomena make us wonder about the nature of consciousness and reality. If our minds are capable of creating such complex, multi-level constructs, what does this say about our ability to perceive and interpret the world around us? Perhaps the boundary between dream and reality is not as clear-cut as we think. Perhaps what we call reality is just another level of consciousness, more stable and consistent than dreaming, but not necessarily more true in an absolute sense. This thought may seem disturbing, but it can also be liberating. If reality is partly a construct of our consciousness, then we have a certain degree of power over it. We can influence how we perceive and interpret the world. The ancient sages said, "Life is sleep, and sleep is life." Perhaps there is deep truth in these words. Perhaps the distinction between sleep and wakefulness is not as important as we think. What matters is what we experience, what we learn, how we grow and develop. When we study the phenomena of false awakening and dreaming in dreams, we are not just studying the brain's functioning during sleep. We are studying the very nature of consciousness, how we create our reality, how we interpret our experiences. Every time you go to sleep, you go on a journey into the uncharted territories of your own consciousness. You may encounter strange phenomena that make you question what you thought was obvious. You may wake up in a dream, fall asleep in a dream, experience several levels of reality at the same time. And none of this is an anomaly, not a brain malfunction. It is a normal, natural part of the human experience. It is the way our consciousness explores itself, tries to understand its own nature. People have always tried to understand the meaning of their dreams. They have compiled dream books, created systems of interpretation, looked for messages and predictions in dreams. Although we cannot claim that dreams carry literal messages from the future, we can say that they tell us a lot about our inner world. Keeping a dream diary can be a useful tool for self-discovery. By recording your dreams, you may notice recurring images, themes, and emotions. You can see how your subconscious mind reacts to events in your life, what problems are bothering it, what desires and fears are lurking in the depths of your psyche. But remember, you should not take dream interpretations too literally. A dream is not a message to be deciphered, but rather a reflection of the inner processes going on in your psyche. It is not the exact meaning of each symbol that is important, but the overall impression, the emotional tone of the dream, the feelings it evokes in you. If you often experience false awakenings or dreams in your sleep, it may be a sign of stress, fatigue, or unresolved internal conflicts. In such cases, it may be helpful to see a specialist, a psychologist, or somnologist. Meditation, breathing exercises, and relaxation techniques may also help. Developing mindfulness, not only in sleep, but also in wakefulness, can help you better understand your inner processes. When you carefully observe your thoughts, emotions, and reactions during the day, you develop the same capacity for self-observation that can manifest in dreams. Some people practice special exercises to develop the ability to dream consciously. They ask themselves during the day, "Am I awake?" They check the time, look at their hands, try to read a text. The purpose of these exercises is to develop the habit of reality checking, which can also manifest in dreams. But remember, the goal is not to constantly doubt the reality of what is happening. The goal is to develop a deeper understanding of the workings of your own consciousness, to learn to understand yourself better. We live in an amazing time when science is beginning to penetrate the mysteries of consciousness. Modern technology allows us to observe how the brain works during sleep, to study the neural mechanisms underlying dreams. we are learning more and more about how dreams are formed, how memory works during sleep, and how different phases of sleep are linked to different brain functions. And yet, much remains a mystery. We still don't know why dreams often seem so strange and illogical to us. We don't understand how exactly the brain creates such vivid, detailed images. We do not know why some dreams are remembered and others are forgotten instantly. These mysteries make the study of dreams particularly fascinating. Each new fact opens up new questions for us. Each study brings us closer to understanding one of the most profound mysteries, the nature of human consciousness. And here, in this silence of the night, when we talk about dreams and awakenings, about reality and illusions, we are talking about something very important. We are talking about what makes us human, the capacity for self-awareness, for reflection, for trying to understand ourselves. Every time you experience a false awakening or a dream within a dream, you are engaging in this ancient process of self-discovery. Your consciousness is exploring its own boundaries, trying to understand where the I ends and the not I begins, where the boundary between the inner and outer worlds lies. It can be a frightening experience, but it can also be deeply enlightening. It reminds us that our perception of reality is not a passive reflection of the external world. We actively construct our reality, interpret it, give it meaning. Perhaps this is the profound value of studying phenomena such as false awakening and dreaming in dreams. They remind us that consciousness is not a static thing, but a dynamic process. It is not a mirror that simply reflects the world, but an active, creative principle that creates the world. And as we lie in bed, preparing for sleep, we can think about it with wonder and gratitude. Every night, we get the opportunity to explore the uncharted territories of our own consciousness. Each dream is an adventure. Each awakening is a return to another reality. But which of these realities is more true? Perhaps this question does not have a definite answer. Perhaps each of them is true in its own way. Perhaps what matters is not which reality is right, but that we can experience both. We can move from one to the other. We can compare them and learn from that comparison. Ancient philosophers spoke of a cave in which people see only shadows of real things and mistake those shadows for reality itself. But what if there is no one true reality? What if there are many levels of reality, and each one is important and meaningful in its own way? Sleep and wakefulness, reality and illusion, consciousness and subconsciousness, all these categories may not be opposites, but different aspects of a whole. Perhaps it is in recognizing this unity that wisdom lies. When we study false awakenings and dreaming in dreams, we are not just studying curious features of brain function. We are exploring fundamental questions about the nature of consciousness, how we create our reality, and how we interpret our experiences. And perhaps the most important thing we can realize from this study is that our consciousness is much more flexible and creative than we usually think. We are not just passive observers of the world. We are active participants in creating the world we live in. Every time you fall asleep, you demonstrate the amazing ability of your consciousness to transform. You move from one state to another, from one reality to another. And sometimes, in moments of false awakening or dreaming in a dream, you experience this transformation especially vividly. These experiences can be disorienting, but they can also be liberating. They remind us that the boundaries we think are immutable may actually be more fluid than we think. Perhaps this is one of the most important lessons we can learn from studying these phenomena. Reality is not something fixed and unchanging. It is constantly being created and recreated by our consciousness. And we have a certain degree of power over this process. This does not mean that we can change the external world by a single effort of will. But it does mean that we can change our attitude to this world, our understanding of it, our interpretation of what is happening. And this change can be very significant. The next time you experience a false awakening or dream, try to view the experience with curiosity rather than anxiety. Try to see it not as an anomaly, but as an opportunity to better understand the workings of your own consciousness. Ask yourself questions. What does this experience tell me about my inner world? What aspects of my life might be reflected in these layered dreams? What can I learn about myself from this experience? And remember, you are not alone in these experiences. Millions of people all over the world have similar experiences. It is part of the universal experience, part of what makes us human. The study of dreams and dreaming has a long history. People have always tried to understand the meaning of their night visions. They have created myths and legends to explain the origin of dreams. They have developed systems of interpretation, trying to find guidance for their lives in dreams. Although modern science is giving us more precise knowledge about the mechanisms of sleep, the basic questions remain the same. What do our dreams mean? How do they relate to our waking life? What can they tell us about ourselves? Perhaps the answers to these questions are not as important as the process of asking them. Perhaps it is important not to find definitive answers, but to retain the ability to wonder, to question, to explore the mysteries of one's own consciousness. After all, every dream is a unique experience. Every awakening is a return to another reality. And in this constant transition between states of consciousness, we can find not only an understanding of how our brain works, but also a deeper understanding of ourselves. Now, as night shrouds the world, when only our voices are heard in the silence, we can feel a special connection to these mysterious processes. We can imagine millions of people around the world falling into sleep as their consciousness begins to create amazing worlds full of images and experiences. Some will experience false awakenings. Others will dream in their sleep. Some will experience conscious dreaming. Some will wake up with vivid memories of their nighttime adventures. And all these are manifestations of one and the same amazing phenomenon: human consciousness. We often think of sleep as a passive state, a time of rest for our brains. But in fact, sleep is a period of intense activity, a time when our consciousness works according to other laws, exploring alternative ways of perceiving and processing information. And in this context, the phenomena of false awakening and dreaming in dreams take on special significance. They show us that our consciousness is capable of much more complex operations than we usually think. It can create multi-level realities, move between them, and maintain the illusion of consistency, even in the most paradoxical situations. Think about it. When you experience a false awakening, your brain is not just creating random images. It constructs a coherent, logically connected reality. It places you in familiar surroundings. It makes you behave in ways that you would normally behave upon awakening. It creates a convincing illusion of continuity of experience. It requires incredible coordination of different areas of the brain. Memory systems have to work to recreate familiar surroundings. The areas responsible for planning and executing actions must be activated. Emotional centers must function to create appropriate experiences. And all of this happens in a state we call sleep. A state in which we consider our consciousness to be off. What an amazing paradox. It turns out that our consciousness never completely switches off. It simply goes into a different mode of operation, begins to function according to other principles. Perhaps this is why ancient cultures attached such great importance to dreams. They intuitively understood that sleep is not just the absence of wakefulness, but a special state of consciousness in which important processes of cognition and self-knowledge can take place. In some traditions, dreams were seen as journeys of the soul to other worlds. In others, as messages from the gods or ancestors. Modern science gives us other explanations, but the basic intuition remains the same. Something important happens in dreams, something meaningful to our understanding of ourselves and the world. And when we encounter such complex phenomena as false awakening or dreaming in dreams, we get a particularly vivid reminder of this significance. These experiences force us to question our usual ideas about reality, about the boundaries between different states of consciousness. But doubt is not necessarily a bad thing. Philosophers have always talked about the value of doubt as a tool of knowledge. When we begin to doubt what seemed obvious to us, we open up possibilities for deeper understanding. Cartesius began his philosophy by methodically doubting everything that could be questioned. And the only thing he could not doubt was that he doubted. That is, thought. I think, therefore I exist. This famous formula was born out of deep reflection on the nature of reality and consciousness. Perhaps the experiences of false awakening and dreaming in dreams offer us a modern version of this Cartesian doubt. They force us to ask, what can I know for sure? How can I distinguish reality from illusion? What does it mean to be conscious? These questions may seem abstract, but they have very practical implications. Understanding the nature of consciousness can help us better understand ourselves, our reactions, our abilities. It can help us to cope more effectively with stress, solve problems, and develop our potential. For example, if we realize that our perception of reality is partly a construct of our consciousness, we can be more conscious about how we interpret events in our lives. We can learn to see situations from different angles and find alternative ways of understanding what is happening. This is especially important in difficult moments of life. When we face problems, our consciousness is often fixed on one interpretation of the situation, one way of understanding it. But the experience of exploring multi-level states of consciousness reminds us that there are always alternative perspectives, other ways of seeing. Just as in dreams, we can move from one level of reality to another. In waking life, we can move from one perspective to another. This does not mean that all interpretations are equal, but it does mean that we have a choice in how we understand and react to what is happening. People who practice conscious dreaming often report that the experience changes their attitude to life in general. They become more flexible in their thinking, more open to new possibilities, more confident in their ability to influence their reality. Of course, it is important not to go to extremes. Recognizing that our perception of reality is partly a construct does not mean that we can ignore objective facts or logical constraints. But it does mean that we have more freedom in how we treat those facts, how we interpret and use them. Returning to the phenomena of false awakening and dreaming in dreams, we can say that they serve as a kind of laboratory for studying these processes. In the safe environment of dreaming, we can experiment with different levels of reality, different ways of perceiving and interpreting experience. Some researchers suggest that this function may be one of the evolutionary reasons for the existence of complex dreams. Perhaps the ability to create and explore alternative realities in dreams gave our ancestors advantages in solving problems and adapting to changing conditions. Think about it. Every night, our brains run some sort of simulation, creating different scenarios, replaying different possibilities. Sometimes, these simulations involve complex, multi-layered constructs, such as dreaming in dreams or false awakenings. Perhaps this is our brain's way of training itself to navigate complex, uncertain situations. In real life, we often encounter situations where boundaries are not entirely clear, where we need to adapt quickly to changing conditions. The experience of navigating multiple levels of reality in dreams can prepare us for such situations. This may explain why false awakenings often occur in times of stress or uncertainty. Perhaps our brains use these states to practice strategies for coping with uncertainty, to develop flexibility in perception and response. It is also interesting to note cultural differences in the perception of these phenomena. In some cultures, dreams in dreams or false awakenings are seen as particularly meaningful experiences, perhaps as signs or messages. In other cultures, they may be interpreted differently. This reminds us that our interpretation of inner experiences always takes place within a specific cultural context. How we understand and evaluate our dreams depends not only on their content, but also on the cultural framework within which we interpret them. But despite these cultural differences, the phenomena themselves appear to be universal. People in all cultures experience complex dreams, including false awakenings and dreams within dreams. This suggests that these experiences are rooted in fundamental features of human consciousness, not simply cultural constructs. And this brings us back to one of the most exciting aspects of studying consciousness. We are exploring what makes us human at the deepest level. We are exploring not only how our brains work, but also how our uniquely human experience of consciousness arises. Every time you experience a false awakening or a dream within a dream, you are participating in this grand exploration. Your consciousness is demonstrating its capacity for creativity, for creating complex, multi-layered realities. This is not just a curious side effect of the brain. It is a manifestation of one of the most amazing human abilities. We live in an age where science is beginning to unlock many of the mysteries of consciousness. Neuroscience is giving us an increasingly detailed understanding of how different areas of the brain interact to create different states of consciousness. Psychology is helping us to understand the functional significance of various aspects of dreams. But even with all these advances, consciousness remains largely a mystery. We still don't know exactly how neural activity translates into subjective experience. We don't understand why we have an inner life, why something means to be us. This mystery makes the study of phenomena such as false awakenings and dreaming in dreams particularly important. They give us a window into the workings of consciousness, an opportunity to observe it in unusual states when its normal rules of operation are altered or violated. Perhaps it is in these borderline states that we can best understand the nature of consciousness. When a system is not operating in its normal mode, aspects of its functioning that normally remain hidden become visible. It reminds me of the way astronomers study stars. Under normal circumstances, many features of stars remain invisible. But during eclipses or other unusual astronomical events, details that are normally hidden from observation become visible. Perhaps false awakenings and dreams in dreams are a kind of eclipses of consciousness, moments when the normal order is disrupted and aspects of consciousness work that normally remain behind the scenes become visible. And just as astronomers use eclipses to gain new insights into the nature of stars, we can use these unusual states of consciousness to gain new insights into the nature of our own minds. This requires us to pay special attention to our inner experiences and to be willing to observe and reflect on them without preconceptions. When we experience a false awakening, it is important not just to dismiss it as a strange dream, but to try to understand what it can tell us about the workings of our consciousness. What elements made the experience compelling? How did your mind create the illusion of continuity? What made you eventually realize that you were dreaming? These details can give us valuable insights into the workings of the processes of perception, memory, and self-awareness. Similarly, when you are experiencing a dream within a dream, it is worth paying attention to how your consciousness deals with this complex, multi-level structure. How does it maintain a sense of identity through the different levels? How does it create different rules for each level? These observations may help us better understand not only how consciousness works in dreams, but also how it works in the waking state. Perhaps the mechanisms that create multi-layered dreams are similar to those that allow us to cope with complex, multi-layered situations in real life. Think about how often throughout the day you switch between different levels of attention and awareness. Sometimes you are fully focused on a specific task. Sometimes part of your attention is on the task, and part of it is thinking about something else. Sometimes you seem to step out of yourself and observe yourself from the outside. These different levels of consciousness in the waking state may have something in common with the levels of consciousness we experience in complex dreams. Learning about one can help us better understand the other. In addition, the practice of closely observing one's dreams can develop general skills of self-observation and reflection. These skills are valuable not only for understanding dreams, but also for personal growth and self-knowledge in general. When we develop the ability to closely observe the workings of our own consciousness, we gain more power over our reactions, emotions, and thought processes. We become less dependent on automatic patterns of behavior and thinking. This can be especially valuable in our rapidly changing world, where the ability to be flexible and adaptable is increasingly important. The skills we develop by exploring multi-level states of consciousness in sleep can help us to better cope with the multi-level challenges of waking life. But let's return to the phenomena of false awakening and dreaming themselves. What makes these experiences so special? Why do they so capture our imagination? I think one of the reasons is that they represent a kind of paradox. They are at once familiar and unfamiliar, real and unreal, understandable and mysterious. They challenge our usual categories of thinking. In false awakening, we experience something that seems completely familiar, the process of awakening that we experience every day. But at the same time, something about the experience is subtly different. It's familiar, but it's not quite familiar. In the dream within the dream, we are confronted with an even more dizzying paradox. We are asleep, but at the same time, we are also asleep within this dream. How does our consciousness deal with this recursive structure? How does it maintain a sense of coherence and logic in such a paradoxical situation? These questions raise fundamental issues in the philosophy of consciousness. What does it mean to be conscious? How does consciousness create a sense of unity and continuity of experience? How does it deal with contradictions and paradoxes? Perhaps studying these unusual dream states can give us new insights into these ancient philosophical problems. Perhaps by observing how consciousness works under the extreme conditions of complex dreams, we can better understand how it works under normal conditions. And here we come to one of the most intriguing aspects of this whole subject. The study of false awakenings and dreaming in dreams is not just a study of curious dream anomalies. It is the study of the nature of reality itself. If our consciousness can create such convincing alternate realities in dreams, what does this say about the nature of the reality we experience in the waking state? Perhaps the boundary between real and constructed is not as clear as we think. Modern physics has already challenged many of our intuitive ideas about the nature of reality. Quantum mechanics has shown us that, at a fundamental level, reality can be very different from what we observe in the macroscopic world. The theory of relativity has shown us that time and space are not absolute, but depend on the point of view of the observer. Perhaps the study of consciousness and dreams adds another layer to this reconsideration of the nature of reality. Perhaps it shows us that subjective reality, the reality of our experience, is also more complex and multi-layered than we usually realize. This does not mean that we should fall into complete relativism or solipsism. Objective reality undoubtedly exists and imposes limits on what is possible. But it does mean that our experience of this reality is always mediated by the workings of our consciousness, always the result of a complex process of interpretation and construction. And in this context, the phenomena of false awakening and dreaming in dreams take on special significance. They remind us of the creative power of consciousness, of its ability to create rich, detailed worlds of experience. Perhaps it is in recognizing this creative power that lies one of the keys to a fuller understanding of ourselves and our capabilities. If our consciousness is capable of creating such complex realities in dreams, what else is it capable of creating? What other possibilities are hidden in its depths? This is not a call for magical thinking or denial of objective reality. It is an invitation to a deeper exploration of the potential of human consciousness, to a fuller utilization of its possibilities. And here, in the silence of this night, as we reflect on dreams and awakenings, on reality and illusions, we can feel connected to something bigger than ourselves. We participate in the eternal human endeavor to understand ourselves and our place in the world. Every time you go to sleep, you are embarking on a journey whose results are unpredictable. Perhaps you will have a normal dream. Perhaps you will experience a false awakening or a dream within a dream. You may experience a conscious dream. Whatever your experience, it will be a unique, unrepeatable creation of your consciousness. And in this creation, you may find not only entertainment or relaxation, but also profound insights into the nature of your own mind. So the next time you wake up from a complex, layered dream, take the time to forget its details. Take a few minutes to reflect on what you experienced. Try to understand how your consciousness created the experience. What mechanisms were at work behind the scenes? And remember, in these reflections, you are joining an ancient tradition of human self-knowledge. From ancient philosophers to modern neuroscientists, people have always sought to understand the nature of consciousness and dreams. Your own observations and reflections are part of this great project of understanding. The world of dreams remains largely mysterious, full of secrets and paradoxes. But perhaps it is in this mystery that its special value lies. It reminds us that there is still much that remains unexplored in the depths of human experience, many opportunities for discovery and understanding. And as night envelops the world, as the consciousness of millions of people prepares to dive into the world of dreams, we can feel a special connection to this great mystery. We are all participants in one grand experiment, an experiment of consciousness exploring itself through an infinite variety of states and experiences. Every dream is a new experiment. Every awakening is a new discovery. And in this endless process of exploration and discovery, we can find not only insights into the workings of our minds, but also a deeper understanding of what it means to be human. Now that our conversation is coming to an end, when the night has reached its deepest point, I feel that it is time to let all these reflections go into silence. The words dissolve into the air like morning mist, but what we talked about remains, somewhere in the depths of consciousness, ready to manifest itself at the most unexpected moment. Perhaps this night, when you close your eyes and let sleep embrace you, something from our conversation will resonate in your dreams. Perhaps your consciousness, enriched by new insights into the nature of sleep and wakefulness, will create particularly vivid and meaningful images. And you know, there is something beautiful in the fact that we cannot fully control what happens to us in our dreams. There is something wonderful in the fact that every night our consciousness gives us a surprise, a new reality, new experiences, new possibilities for understanding ourselves. So may this night, as you fall into the embrace of sleep, may your consciousness give you a special journey, and may you dream dreams where boundaries become bridges, where every awakening, false or true, brings with it a sense of deep understanding and peace. May you dream multi-level worlds where you wander between realities as a wise explorer, learning the infinite possibilities of your own consciousness. And if you experience a false awakening, let it not be a source of anxiety, but a moment of wonder, before the creative power of your mind. And if you see a dream in your sleep, let it be like a descent into deep underground caverns, where each new level reveals more and more beautiful and mysterious galleries of your inner world. May your dreams be full of that quiet wisdom that comes only in the silence of the night, when the mind is freed from the cares of the day and allows itself to explore truths that are inaccessible to the waking mind. And let each awakening, real or false, bring with it a piece of this wisdom into your daytime world. Good night, dear listener. May your dreams be deep and your awakenings soft.